You're listening to the Good Food CFO podcast, where we challenge the status quo of the food industry, celebrate good food founders who are building businesses on their own terms, introduce industry disruptors, and are redefining equitability. If you're ready to build your financial confidence and join the good food revolution to change the way the food industry does business, you are in the right place. I'm the Good Food CFO and your host, Sarah Delavan. Today on the podcast, I'm kicking off season 6 with a story and the Good Food CFO's first book recommendation, something that I think is required reading for anyone who strives to build a business on their own terms. Let's get to it. Hey guys, Happy New Year. Over the last 2 weeks, you may have noticed that we've been airing rewind episodes, and we re-aired episodes 49 and 50. These are 2 episodes that feel pivotal in my journey as both a consultant and the creator of this podcast, and also as a member of the good food movement and the food industry as a whole. Since day one of my consulting business, I knew that I would and could help food businesses be successful on their own terms, but I didn't call it that back then. And I knew that how I was approaching the numbers, the cost targets, and the strategy with the business owners I worked with was different from anything I had been taught in undergrad and graduate school. It was different than what I had heard my former bosses and CEOs talking about, right? And how they were talking about it. But I also knew that it worked because I had proven it before starting my consulting business. But I was shy. I was shy about it. And in fact, I was scared really to say out loud where too many people could hear me that we were doing things differently here and that you could be successful and build a business that makes a difference and that you don't have to grow at a crazy rapid pace or get VC funding and give away portions of your business to make it happen. You can, but you don't have to. There was a big part of me that doubted my voice and feared really speaking up about this thing that I seem to have discovered that no one else was talking about. In fact, nearly 4 years before releasing the cash flow episode that we released in season 5, I was teaching that philosophy to a client, but I never shared it publicly because it was so different than how people were publicly writing and talking about cash flow and profit margins. So how could I possibly be right if no one else was talking about it too? My fears and doubts were in complete contradiction to the success that my clients were having and to what I knew was working. So while I continued working, knowing that we were helping and changing people's lives, I stayed quiet about it. I was afraid to be the only voice I knew, contradicting everything that was being shared in the industry and in the media. And I was helping people, my client list was growing, so I could stay quiet and still build a beautiful business. And then during 2022, I met several women within a 2-month time frame, all who had reached out to me after having very bad experiences with industry experts, investors, and or partners. All of these women had similar stories, not identical, but similar, with the same ending. These experts, these investors and partners had big name industry experience and stepped in to aggressively grow sales and take their business to the next level to become a big, successful CPG brand. But what happened was they drove their businesses into the ground, really. They grew so fast with aggressive trade deals and tiny margins. And while revenue was growing, they were losing more and more money with every sale. The partner or investor left or were asked to leave, and the founder was left with huge bills to pay and a business that they wanted to save. I was saddened by this. I was angered by this. I was frustrated by this, but I was also glad that they could turn to me and felt safe asking for support and guidance as they rebuilt their businesses. And I realized that this was going to continue to happen unless I started speaking up about what I believed in and what I knew businesses had the choice to do. These women found me after really critical events in their businesses that helped them to realize they wanted to build their business on their own terms, like they had been before the investor or partner came along. The story of these women, along with another who found herself in a predatory investor relationship, clients who were paying tens of thousands of dollars for slotting fees and free fills, who were subjects of price elasticity testing in retail stores, and so many other frustrating truths about the industry had become such a big part of my day to day and my communications internally that I realized no matter how scary it feels to speak the truth, I had to do it. Realizing that if speaking out helped just one founder understand that there is not just one version of what success looks like for a food or beverage business. There's not just one way to achieve success, and you don't have to follow anyone's rules to get there, then it's worth pushing through my fear. And when I did that and I started talking more about what I was seeing in the industry, this podcast, our community, and our mission were all reimagined and realigned. This podcast, as part of the overarching mission of the Good Food CFO, has an objective, and that is to disrupt food business media and change the financial stories being told because they don't represent the majority. We're also working to combat the groupthink that is currently happening around how to build a quote successful business so that founders realize they have options and choices. It can be hard to believe in your unique vision and dream for your business if everyone around you and every success story you are hearing are all the same and different from your vision. It's difficult for a founder who has experienced something like I shared a few minutes ago to share their stories and get support if they don't have a space in which they feel safe to share it. Bo Burlingham is the author of Small Giants, and he wrote the book with a similar objective. Small Giants, much like this podcast, is an outlier in the world of business media, writing, and content. And I consider it a must-read book for anyone who is ready or who wants to build a business on their own terms. Bo Burlingham was a writer for Inc. magazine, and he had written a cover story on Zingerman's community of businesses, which had come into existence after the owners of Zingerman's Deli in Ann Arbor, Michigan, had walked away from a golden opportunity to expand nationally and decided instead to stay local and launch other food-related businesses. Burlingham wondered if Zingerman's was an anomaly or if there were other owners who had made similar choices for their businesses. And as he did research, he began to discover just how many similar companies were out there. And he began to feel as though he had stumbled across a significant development that had somehow eluded writers like him who spent their time surveying and writing about the corporate landscape. So he discovered lots of companies whose owners had the opportunity to raise a lot of venture capital, grow very fast, expand geographically, and generally follow the well-worn route of other successful businesses. But they didn't. They chose not to focus solely on revenue growth or geographical expansion, to pursue instead other goals that they considered more important than getting as big as possible, as fast as possible. This discovery, the identification of these businesses and their owners, led to more research and ultimately the writing of the book, Small Giants. Now, why is this so exciting and why do I think that this is so important? As Bo points out in the introduction of his book, companies like these, private companies, have not been recognized much up until the point that he wrote the book. To an extraordinary extent, our view of business, indeed, our whole concept of what business is, has been shaped by publicly owned companies, which actually make up a small percentage of the entire business population, and by fast growing technology ventures, which is an even smaller group. Virtually every mass market business bestseller has concentrated on the people in and the practices of large public companies or companies aspiring to be large and public. So too are those companies the focus of most major business magazines, newspapers, business shows, television and radio shows, and the curricula of business schools. Along the way, we have come to accept as business axioms these various ideas that actually only apply to those two types of enterprises. Through these stories and the curriculum, we have been fed two pervasive myths. Burlingham says that myth one is the myth of getting to the next level. He says people use this phrase in different ways in different contexts, but it always has something to do with a major increase in sales. And there's usually a management component as well. That is that you get to the next level when you can handle the demands of running a much bigger company. Because it's the quote, next level, the phrase implies that bigger is better. That may or may not be true for public companies, but he's found that it's demonstrably untrue for a large number of private ones. Myth number two is the notion of shareholder value. And this seems so obvious, but was such a big aha moment when I was reading the book. The greatest confusion, Burlingham says, that results from our focus on publicly traded companies comes into play around the notion of shareholder value. For public companies, it has a very specific meaning because they are legally and morally obligated to strive to produce the best possible financial results for their shareholders. That's the deal. If you take other people's money, you're supposed to give them what they want in exchange. And what buyers of publicly traded stocks want is a good return on their investment. The relationship seems so obvious and logical that we generally assume all businesses must operate the same way. But that assumption ignores another equally obvious truth, which is that what's in the interest of shareholders depends on who the shareholders are. In the privately owned companies that Burlingham studied in Small Giants, they had non-financial priorities in addition to their financial objectives. And it's not that they didn't want to earn a good return on their investment, but it wasn't their only goal or even necessarily their paramount goal. They were also interested in being great at what they did, creating a great place to work, providing great service to customers, having great relationships with their suppliers, making great contributions to the communities they lived in and worked in, and finding great ways to lead their personal lives. They learned that to excel at these things, they had to keep ownership and control inside the company, and in many cases, place limits on how much and how fast they grew. The wealth that they created was substantial, but was a byproduct of success in these other areas. Now, I venture to guess that some of you are wondering exactly how small these small businesses are. And I was asking myself that question when I read the book the first time. And while the author addresses it in the introduction, as well as shares the revenue and size of, I think, all, if not most, of the businesses that he studies, I did a bit of my own research and found that the SBA defines small business as having revenue of up to $1 million for some industries and over $40 million for other industries. And They can have a maximum number of employees of between 100 and 1,500, depending on the industry. So I looked into food manufacturing businesses, and for that type of business, you qualify not based on revenue at all, but by the number of employees. And you're considered a small food manufacturing business if you have somewhere between 500 and 1,250 employees max. So here's a couple examples for you. If you are listening and you make dressings, spices, or perishable prepared foods, you can have 500 employees or less and be considered a small business. If you're a confectionery maker or manufacturer, you can have 1,000 employees or less and be considered a small business. And if you make cookies and crackers, frozen foods, or cheese, the max is 1,250. So this is an important thing to kind of wrap our heads around, right? When we're talking about small businesses, they can be quite large in comparison to where many of you may be today. The businesses studied within the Small Giants book range from having 2 employees, and it's a clothing design company, to a company with 1,722 employees earning $344 million in annual revenue. So while you may not identify as all of the businesses that are being studied, you're going to find some similarities. And there are 14 businesses in total, including 4 businesses in the food and beverage space, 2 of which are in CPG. They have a variety of business structures and ownership models, but what they all have in common is that their leaders were faced with the same question. Did they want to keep growing ever bigger? And each of the leaders realized that they had a choice on both how to grow and how big. And they built their businesses on their own terms. One of my favorite parts of the book, and there are many, is the message from the company's owners. I'm going to read it for you now. It reads, "The companies in this book have a message for every person who sets out to build a business, and it's an important one. If the business survives, you will sooner or later have a choice about how far and how fast you want to grow. No one is going to warn you about it or prepare you for it or tell you when the moment arrives. Chances are your banker, your lawyer, your accountant, or whoever else you turn to for advice will encourage you to grow as fast and as far as you can. The bigger your company grows, the better their advice looks, and the more business you're going to do with them in the future. The outside world will send you similar signals. We all want to be successful, and our visions of success are inevitably shaped to a large extent by examples in the media, by the spirit of the times, and by common wisdom about what's possible. When we constantly hear about the need to grow or die, if everybody seems to be trying to get to the next level, if the only companies being celebrated or even taken seriously are the biggest or the fastest growing, you may never even think to ask about options other than growing your business as much as you can and as quickly as you can. Nor can you count on your friends and family, those who really do have your best interests at heart, to point out that you might find more happiness by choosing another path. They're probably not aware of any alternative either. Like most people, they assume that getting big is the whole idea. But you have a choice, and the payoff for choosing the less traveled path can be huge. It can affect every aspect of your business, from relationships with people you work with, to the control you have over your time and your destiny, to the impact you have on the world around you, and to the satisfaction and fulfillment that you get out of your professional life. Burlingham points out that unfortunately, many people have to pass through a major crisis to recognize the choice that they have. And some don't see it until they've already gotten themselves and their companies into serious trouble. Others have to arrive at a critical crossroads. What Bo is doing with his book and what we're trying to do here with this podcast and the Good Food CFO community and the courses we've released is to make business owners aware of your choices and not doing it in a way that only shares the successes, because business is challenging. There will be years where growth is necessary and you're not profitable. You'll need outside funding to support your business in the growth that you want to have, both internally and externally. You'll make mistakes. You'll be faced with difficult decisions. We all will be. And that is part of the storytelling and sharing, not just the wins and the shiny, exciting moments. By changing the dialogue around how you can grow a business, by sharing more stories and providing more examples of struggles and successes that don't resemble the path of publicly traded companies, that don't include venture capital, that don't include changing your culture and your priorities, that don't include hitting $20 million in revenue and being asked to step down as the CEO of your company, that do consider your passion, that do consider your lifestyle and your priorities outside of work, and that let go of industry standards and encourage you to dream and to think and to build a business on your own terms. The vast majority of businesses in this country are privately owned. The vast majority of food business owners don't want to be the next General Mills, and they don't want to sell to General Mills or another corporation like it. You all have your own dreams. Build your dream. Myself, other founders, industry experts, and disruptors are coming together here and in the new Good Food CFO community to support you. And we'll continue to share books and articles and other podcasts that are also changing the narrative. I encourage you to read Small Giants if you haven't already. And if you've read a good book, listened to a great podcast, or otherwise read or heard a story of someone building a business on their own terms, please share it with us via email. You can send your emails to jointheconvo@thegoodfoodcfo.com. You can visit thegoodfoodcfo.com for more details and information regarding our free and our paid community membership levels, and join the discussion about Small Giants and how you are building your business inside the community. As always, I am so grateful to have spent time with you here today. If you've enjoyed this episode or found it helpful or inspiring in any way, please share it with your founder friends on social and rate and review the podcast wherever you listen. It is the #1 way to help more good food founders find the show. I will be back with a brand new episode in 2 weeks.